the kind of man.
Winter in America, Gil Scott-Heron and Brian Jackson on Strata East, 1974. Brian Jackson, born in New York, primarily known for his collaboration with Gil Scott-Heron. He is a pianist and flautist, a musician, songwriter, composer, and met Scott-Heron at Lincoln University. Gil Scott-Heron grew up in Jackson, Tennessee with his grandmother. When she passed away, moved back to New York. A poet and songwriter and singer, but also pianist. He had a long recording career from 1970 all the way through to 2010, starting off with spoken word on Small Talk at 125 and Lenox. He was signed to Flying Dutchman with Bob Thiel, all the way through until 2010 when he released I'm New Here on the XL Records label. Passed away a year after that in 2011. Struggled with substance abuse through the 90s and was in and out of rehab, but also prison as well. But he'll be remembered for his fiery political spoken word and lyrics and vocal, and his legacy is in his records that he's left behind. A record recorded in the spring of '73 in DC, released the year later in 1974 on a small independent label out of New York, Strata East, which was primarily a jazz label started by Charles Tolliver and Stanley Cowell. And it stands out among the Strata East catalogue as sort of the odd one out, I'd probably say. Primarily the catalogue was for modal jazz, spiritual kind of nature, definitely Afrocentric, whereas this record, it kind of stands out as a vocal soul jazz record, although that's kind of pigeonholing it a little bit too much. But it's slightly different when you compare it with the rest of the Strata East catalogue. Although there are the drum and bass, there's drums and bass on here, two other players. It's essentially Brian Jackson on the piano and the electric piano and the flute. Gil Scott-Heron on vocals and piano as well. The other guys were brought in just for a couple of days in the studio just to complete some of the tracks. But essentially it is just Brian Jackson and Gil Scott-Heron. They'd released 3 records on Flying Dutchman. This was the 4th. And I think they left and moved to Strata East for various reasons. Creative control. Bob Thiel was known as a very active producer and active in the sessions, whereas Strata East kind of idea was you'd leave it to the artist to come up with the record that they chose. And there's also a mention of maybe they moved to Strata East so Brian Jackson could get the credit on the record, whereas Bob Thiel wanted it to be just Gil Scott-Heron, even though they were working together as a collaboration. And as a result, what you get is a less polished record than they had come out with in a couple of years earlier. Certainly more intimate, and you can really sort of feel that they're allowed to do their thing. There's a couple of spoken word tracks. There's certainly long extended tracks. It wasn't, you've got the one single, The Bottle, that's sort of your tight kind of commercial length. But you can certainly tell that they were allowed to do what they wanted in the studio. The themes is highly political. The record doesn't quite close, but the second last song is dealing with Watergate, H2O Gate Blues, and Scott-Heron certainly doesn't miss when he fires shots. It's a spoken word rap over kind of a bluesy, almost like a live studio feel. And it was a track that they'd been performing live, and I don't think Gil Scott-Heron actually wanted this to be on the record initially, but was convinced that it was appropriate, certainly for the times. They're also dealing with substance abuse on The Bottle, which was the single, dealing with alcoholism, whether that was in their community or in America as a whole. And the title of the record, actually, Winter in America, is Gil Scott-Heron is reported as saying he felt like America was going into a time of a long winter, not just for the 3 months, but for an extended period of time. They were dealing with energy and oil crisis. There was, of course, Watergate, various other social and political issues that he thought, they were going into a dark, he called it kind of an ice period. And he was also reported as saying summer was kind of killed off when they killed Kennedy and King. Scott-Heron's tenor vocals are pained at times and scratchy at times, but he's in full force. Lyrically, he's really sharp. And a real highlight of this is also Brian Jackson's Rhodes, his electric piano. The flute's really nice too and funky, but it's Jackson's Rhodes that kind of float through the whole record. This one I would have bought quite a few years ago on eBay. It does come up from time to time at record fairs and record stores, and it's not a really expensive record. You'd pick this up for anywhere from $15 to maybe $30 to $40. There has been a modern reissue on vinyl and also CD as well. Firstly, they've got quite a catalogue together. They recorded on Flying Dutchman and then this one on Strata East, and then moved over to Arista and recorded for quite a number of years on Arista, and then Gil Scott-Heron also on his own. But if you want to hear these guys where they're actually doing their thing as they want, without any other factors coming into play in controlling the sounds or the music they're making, then this is the one to go for. It's also nice, Strata East is a collectible label, one of the easier ones to get on the label, but if you are looking at collecting jazz labels, then this is a way you'd be filling out your Strata East catalogue. But also this is one of the best examples of soulful, politically driven jazz rap. This would be the high watermark of both of their careers. Winter in America, Gil Scott-Heron and Brian Jackson. Strata East, 1974.